Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dami. This is the third question of the discussions we've been having so far on inequalities using the New York Times bestselling book Children of Blood and Bone. In case you have missed all the previous discussions, please check those videos out so you can catch up. In the meantime, I have a quick recap of what you have missed so you can follow along in this particular video. Okay, so my next question, the third one, the quote that I have: when your opponent has no honor, you must fight in different ways, smarter ways. So this was Mama Agba speaking to the girls when she was training them to fight. So my first question to you, what message do you think this quote is trying to pass across to Black people regarding police brutality and also women fighting for reproductive rights?
I think the message is trying to say is we shouldn't be afraid to tell our stories, because I think a lot of times, and this is just my interpretation, like when your opponent has no honor, a lot of times, you look into them to, sometimes we might look to them to validate and say, hey, tell our stories. But if we learned anything from Black Panther or Insecure or all these shows, is that there's power in agency. Wakanda Forever, yes. There's power in agency. You look at the movement that spawned, right? The curiosity that spawned. A lot of African Americans who don't know where they're from are like, wow, I am curious about the potential of what Africa is. Like, that is what I want to see. That's what I want to experience. That's Black excellence. That's all that. And that's what I felt like the quote was saying, is that, yeah, that's a smarter way to fight. Where, okay, Hollywood, you haven't been casting us for a long time, all right? I'm just, I'm a Black director. I'm going to cast all these Black people, and I'm going to go into the continent, adopt different things from different parts of the continent, make that into a movie, and show the world that, hey, something is beautiful. And then to people's surprise that I've always said Black movies don't make money, they're like, oh my gosh, that's like the second biggest superhero movie of all. That's a smarter way to do that, where you don't wait for anyone anymore. Right. You just said, I'm telling my story. This book itself that we're talking about, it came, she saw the statues and the art pieces in Brazil, which coincidentally happened to do with West African and Yoruba tradition, and she was like, I didn't know that about that, and I'm Nigerian. I need to tell the story. Yeah. I was listening to an interview with her, and she said, she was ashamed of this, but even when she was initially writing, her heroes tended to be white. And then she was like, wait, why are my heroes white? I'm Black. I'm not even writing my own heroes. And she had to address her own feelings with that. And she said, I need to create something where it's unapologetically Black, and that you're not going to hide from that. And that's a smart way. And now she had a 7-figure deal, right?
I saw that. And she's 23.
Yeah. You see? So that's a smart way.
Representing, man. Nigerian, man. Represent.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned earlier about when you talk about Black Panther. So I am in love with Chadwick Boseman. At some point, he will realize that. He doesn't know that yet, but at some point he will.
Are you sure his girlfriend's going to like that?
Which girlfriend? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Exactly. She doesn't exist. What reality are you living in?
Yeah.
So basically, he said something about how they had, I think the directors or someone, maybe one of the movies is done earlier, they always say Black people don't sell internationally. And then when they took the movie to China, it was like insane. I think they gave him this award of like the most populous actor in America.
I saw you got that. Chadwick got that. Yeah.
I think he thought that was a joke. He was like, "How did that happen?" But the whole idea is like, Black does sell. Like, Black Panther is grossing. Was it the highest or third highest grossing movie ever?
Yeah, something like it's like in the top 3 for sure.
Top 3 for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, but that's the thing, right? And I think when your opponent has no honor, you must fight in different ways. If your opponent could be Hollywood executives, producers who aren't willing to fund the movie, create the movie.
Exactly.
Just create the movie. Exactly. The internet, the different way will be, you've got the internet, create a web show. Like Insecure came, web show. We can create podcasts that are popular right now. What you're doing is another. So these are all different ways and smarter ways that people can just do it. And we've seen it. Even if you want to even take it to entertainment, like let's say Cardi B or any people that are building careers in unconventional ways.
Right.
Like, who knew? Like, if once you create something that people like, any executive's gonna be like, okay, I want to make money too, so right. So that's
Yeah.
Right?
It's interesting when you mentioned that. I thought of someone. Do you know of Devon Franklin?
Oh, yeah, no, I know Devin
Oh,
Franklin.
okay. I love him. Okay. So
Yeah,
you see how like he has his own movie production company and everything, but it's basically that whole idea of like I'm gonna create my own opportunities when they don't provide it for me. And I like that.
yeah,
Like I feel like when I'm thinking about like smarter ways to fight, so like as a woman, for example, getting yourself in the room is something that I learned when I was in college. Like, the new president that we had when the other one left, he constantly talked about the best way to effect change is to be part of the decision making. And for me,
mm-hmm.
part of like the reason why I ended up switching my career was also because of that. Because I don't want anyone making decisions and like that affect me that I don't agree with, like without you actually understanding what I'm going through. So I feel as women and also as Black people, like you mentioned earlier, like being aware of your environment as a Black man, like when you're walking, you're aware of what's going on with the current climate right now, but also like how do you present yourself, how do you carry yourself, how can you be smart in fighting as opposed to should we tend towards violence, or could I also get to a point whereby I'm part of the decision making, I'm part of the
Yeah,
people that puts the policies in place, or creates a law that basically says if you shoot somebody you go to jail, like you know what I mean.
yeah. No, I definitely think we need more seats on the table, and a lot of times the way someone is inevitably going to have you seat on the table is you just doing. And there's no doubt the kind of stuff you do. There's no, I'm pretty sure eventually someone's going to say, "Hey, you should come sit on our board. We've seen the what you've done. You have access to an audience. You've done this for a while. We respect it. We want you to come. That's the type of thing." Or
Mm-hmm.
like the whatever, like even with whenever Diddy's talking about Black Excellence with Jay or all these people, it's whenever you get to the top, you
Mm-hmm.
create your own, like everyone has gotten top. Hey, let's create our own thing. Right. Or like one of the reasons I love LeBron, creating a scholarship fund to send X amount of students to go through college as long as they get this grade, and so those kids don't have to worry about loans. So those are the other opportunities. You don't even have to wait. I'm saying you don't like that's another way to impact something, because if you're impacting someone's access to education all the way through college, that's an opportunity. There's no telling who those kids are going to become.
Exactly.
So those are the type of things that can happen. Whenever you get to the top, bring someone else as well, right? And that's what that I think that's a way we can do that for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to Chadwick Boseman again.
Your husband?
I know my husband in another life. So there was I think there was a time when he wanted to he got into a film school in Oxford and he couldn't afford it. And an actress, I forgot her name. Who was it?
Phylicia Rashad.
Phylicia Rashad, thank you. So Phylicia Rashad, paid for him. Like, actually I think he said Denzel Washington actually paid for it.
Denzel, yeah.
See, I know my baby really well. But she basically did the whole lobbying and helping him, and now he's like the most wonderful man.
He's Black Panther. That's a perfect example of what can happen. Exactly. That's the importance of what that is.
Exactly.
We have to give back, and then when someone says, "Why should I care?" I'm sure Denzel didn't know who his money went to. It was just like, hey, we're friends. Me and Felicia. Okay, I'll fund someone.
Right.
and then that's what that is. So whenever that person says, "Why should I care about STDs?" Tell them that story.
That's right. Exactly. If they know who Chadwick was, they should know who he is. So the next question, based on your experience regarding succeeding in America as a Black person, I guess Black male as well, what has your experience been as an African coming to the U.S., African/nomad? I know you moved around a lot like me.
Yeah.
An African coming to the U.S. in comparison to African Americans that have experienced systemic racism pretty much throughout their life. So when you're thinking about like, how do I succeed in my academics career?
I think that's interesting. I mean, coming here as a Nigerian, is number one goal for my parents was just get your A's, turn into a doctor or an engineer lawyer. So for me, I think my mentality was always to always, the idea of being twice as good or three times as good was drummed into my head. I actually think that's something a lot of African Americans share as well. Like, you got to be twice as good to be half or whatever. And so, there's that commonality.
I actually want to touch a little bit more on something else, because I had a different experience, and you probably do as well. Maybe when I highlighted, you know what I'm talking about. So this kind of ties into the initial question about knowledge being
Mm-hmm.
detrimental. So when I was talking about, because I've had several conversations with people, and one of them particularly was about when you think about African Americans that were raised here and went through the system, and Africans that come to the U.S. for education or whatever, there's a difference in how they succeed.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm saying that is like I feel like it's sort of like a social experiment that we kind of created without even knowing we created.
Mm.
When you haven't been subjected to a lot of racism versus if you've been subjected to racism all your life, how do you thrive? My experience, particularly when I came here, my undergrad was a predominantly white school, and people would come to me and say things like, "Oh, Dami, did you notice that you were the only black person in that class?"
Yes.
And for me, I don't notice that because I'm just like, wait, what? What does that have to do with anything? And usually it's always like African Americans will tell me that, like, did you notice that you were the only black person? They were looking at you that way and whatnot. And my response usually would be that I don't really care. Like the way I think about life, I'm intelligent. I am going to compete with all of you and I'm going to prove to you that I can do exactly what you think I can do. And
Mm.
I noticed that difference, like African Americans sort of like, I guess there's that shrinking of themselves, like, because they've been subjected to that constant, like, beating them down constantly, like, okay, you're not good enough, or because you're black, you can't succeed. That systemic racism sort of like, dampens their shine versus me who hasn't been exposed to that environment. And I come here and I sort of just like, I wouldn't, maybe I'm naive. Initially, maybe it was a little bit of naivety, but there's that part of me that's like, I'm not thinking about that because I'm focused on the one particular goal, which is that I'm here
Mm.
for a reason and I'm here to do what I'm here to do. My parents sent me here for a particular reason.
Yeah.
Um,
Parents, exactly.
so
Parents send you.
exactly. So what I'm trying to like figure out is like when I'm talking about like fighting in smarter ways, like I've had that people sort of like I guess separate themselves from the other group, like, oh, we're not part of them, we're different because we have been raised in a different environment. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts in terms of like that particular angle. You're not exposed to that. They were exposed to that. How has that been for you? And
Well,
also, how does that apply to fighting?
I'll give you a great example of this. So when I was 10, I found myself as a skinny Nigerian kid with a thick Nigerian accent in a French-speaking country in an American international school going through puberty. So I was experiencing multiple
Yeah,
levels of differences. So for me, this has been my life, right? So a lot of
yeah,
what you said, being the only this, being the only that, I got used to that.
mm-hmm.
I actually started to get more excited being that because I
Yeah,
knew I was like on people's only temperature or tentpole to that type of world.
mm-hmm.
And it wasn't a burden for me because I took that as an education opportunity. Now, not everybody has that personality, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's different.
Yeah,
But no, I enjoy it. I've noticed that with, I mean, I've seen like what you said with some African Americans and some not so much. And it really is. I really think it's not a monolith because in my experience, that is the stereotype. A lot of Africans, I know, especially me, when we come here,
mm-hmm.
we're told not to interact with other African Americans because they don't hang out with the thugs and all that. And a lot of African Americans will call us the African booty scratchers. So there was that division. And then there's another thing with Caribbeans and all that. So the first thing I noticed with the black culture here
Mm-hmm.
was just the division.
Yeah,
Light skin, dark skin.
mm-hmm.
African versus Caribbean versus African American.
Mm-hmm.
And you sound white.
Right, that one I got that one a lot.
Yeah, I got
Yeah,
that. You sound white. You sound so. Those are
yeah,
just the things that I noticed, and those are the things that were told to me. Like you're
mm-hmm.
not this, you're not that, and yeah. And of course, I was angry. No one likes to be told that, but I started to become more of an issue to me because I recognize that in Nigeria as well with tribalism.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I've also continued to see is that colonialism and slavery are cousins, and they
Mm-hmm.
were very. A lot of the systems were the same. Where a lot of the conquerors, the Europeans, came here. They divided us in countries we're not supposed to be involved in.
Mm-hmm.
Said, fight among yourselves, and we'll just rule. The same sort of thing was done with slavery. You sort of create this hostile environment where people fight amongst themselves, and then you're taught to self-hate.
Mm-hmm.
And so within the black community, I do think, unfortunately, there's a lot of division, and I think that hinders progress. But
Right.
I'm hopeful that we're moving past that. I mean, you still hear some things here and there, with certain things like, whether it's Black Panther or, Childish Gambino, all these type of things, people willing to tell different stories. But yeah, so that was my experience. I just noticed a lot of division within the community. And as an outsider, I say like, well, if we came together, we could be even more magic.
Right.
And everybody else likes kind of seeing us divided because to them, they're like, see, that's what I said. Look at the stereotypes.
Yeah,
and it's such a weird thing to see as an outsider, because I know if I walk out the door, I'm considered African American, but I know I'm not African American. I'm African.
Yeah.
But
Chimamanda called it American African.
Yeah, American African. So I exist in those worlds, and I see all that. But yeah, that's just been my thing. But I mean, but I like that we've had different experiences because both of us have been the only ones, but it didn't bother me the way, like you said, it didn't bother you. I just sort of noticed more division, and that comes from ignorance more than anything.
Yeah.
And so,
So the last part of this question, if we put ourselves in the other person's shoes or the other group's in their shoes, how can we rise above inequalities, or how can we rise above the challenges? So think about, I have an issue with victim mentality. I get racism. I understand that it's painful. I understand that it's psychological, mental breakdown. I get it. But at some point, I feel you sort of have to stop limiting yourself. At some point. So like me, like growing up, like there are people that I looked up to, like Chadwick Boseman, for example, let's say. Ben Carson, for example, like I was going to go to medical school. So I literally read his biography and I was very obsessed with
Are you still obsessed with Ben
No,
Carson?
I'm not. But I don't want to get, like that's why I said was. I don't want to get political. But I'm not. But basically I went like reading his biography and seeing what he went through, being a Black kid, went to Hopkins, separated as Siamese twins and everything. That's someone that rose above the injustice. And it was also his mom was fighting for him, like a single mother, like fighting for him, making sure that he read books. She chose to not see him the way everybody else saw him. So as this book constantly, like the message at the back of the book is like, they killed my mother, still we rise. Like despite everything that's happening, we're still going to rise above it. And I feel that's the most important thing. Like when you're talking about division, and the more we're divided, there's no way we can unite and work well together. We can't create magic that way. Despite what's going on, despite the fact that people still have still stay in that victim mentality. How do you think or foresee us rising above that inequality?
I mean, no, I definitely see a lot of what you're saying, and I understand it. I just, and it's interesting because on some level, yes, I definitely see that that's true. The victim mentality is not something that I do. But I'm in this environment a lot where I actually see the effects of the system, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I do a lot of I do Big Brother, Big Sister. So it's basically you're paired with someone from the inner city to mentor. Yeah. And the kid that I mentor, he's 11. His dad's a drug dealer. His mom's, I think she's schizophrenic. And so he's in his third foster home, right? So that if you look at the track to that, he had only limited male role models. And I'm glad to play a role in there where I can show him a different path. But there are too many of those things that happen because people don't get access to opportunities and people turn to drugs. So I can't – I mean, I understand that, but I do think that on some level people have to acknowledge that these things exist. Like the future, the next generation is being affected by some of the policies that people are making, whether it's redlining with housing or whether it's access to simple education and free basic education. And so, yes, I think that thing can't be ignored. I also can see when you get here, we have to want more for ourselves, for sure. There's that. So I think they can both exist in tandem, but that's why I don't think it's a monolith. I think the problem exists in multiple levels. That they need to show people, like, you and I anyone listen to both of us can say that could be me, that could be you. So that could work for some people. The other people they're more humanitarian, like they can go into the weeds and fix the education. Whatever we do, I just hope it's action, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just hesitant to minimize the experience because I've seen it firsthand, and a lot of times it's hard to say snap out of it.
No, I'm not saying snap out of it. Like I get it.
No. I'm not even saying you are. But I'm thinking about people that I've had conversations with.
Oh, okay.
And Yeah, it's that. I mean, it's a combination of both. It's not a one answer type thing because for sure, yes, there's some level of things like you have to rise up right there. And, it's funny enough. I read the Ben Carson book too. I thought he was a good role model until 2 years ago.
I know, right?
But yeah, I mean, I do just think that if we all practicing communicating across cultures, we're going to be able to see different things from different perspectives, and that's going to help us get forward. So
yeah, we have come to the end of our video discussion. It was really good, right? I really like this one too. I apologize for how long it was, but there was quite a lot to be said, as you have seen. Unfortunately, there's only one more video series left for this particular topic. However, we have more topics coming up as well, so stay tuned for that. I would love to hear your thoughts about this particular discussion in the comments below. Feel free to share, like, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the last video. See you then.